Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. I'm actually so glad to be back. I felt a little sick for the last couple of days, but I know that in the US it was like Labor Day anyway. So, welcome to a new episode of MarkTech. This is one that is continuing a lot of the coverage that I've already provided on the iPad in general, the iPad Pro in particular, and now more specifically the M3 generation of iPad Pro that is promising to come next year. When exactly next year, we now have some rumors that are pointing towards mid-2024. I think Mark Gurman's prediction of it being like a late spring to a late summer time period will basically be true. My expectation is kind of WWDC. And other subsequent rumors, of course, including stuff like DigiTimes. I usually am very careful with that because I know that a lot of those websites just like to copy-paste basically rumors by more reputable leakers and just slightly rephrase them, maybe add a little bit extra on top. So this video will mostly focus on the iPad Pro, the iPad category as a whole, and what I see as its potential for the future. And last but definitely not least, given the iPhone event coming up next week, we will also be talking about the iPhone 15 Pro and how exactly it will be priced, given that a relatively big price hike is pretty much guaranteed. Now, as I've promised before, the introductory statement in this video will be made available separately, so let's get started with it. Now, since its introduction in 2010, the iPad has been designed to sit between the iPhone and the Mac. It was not supposed to replace either one. It is the last major device category introduced by Steve Jobs, and the iPad 2 is actually the last individual device that he introduced. During its first few years on the market, the iPad was phenomenally successful. It outpaced even how well even the iPhone sold during its first few years. It wasn't until like around year 4 where truly the difference between like iPhone sales and iPad sales became apparent, where the iPhone 4 really took off, while the iPad, by the time like the iPad 4th generation, the iPad Air started coming out, it became apparent that people were like keeping their iPads for significantly longer periods of time, even in that early period. And nowadays people obviously keep their iPads easily for 5 to 7 years, while with the iPhone 3 or even 4-year upgrade cycles are kind of the longest one that you would expect, especially for enthusiasts, where you are much more likely to see like 2-year upgrade cycles or even like annual upgrade cycles anyway. So as basically the years went on, the iPhone display grew, the Mac reasserted itself as the pinnacle of Apple-based productivity. Especially with the introduction of Apple Silicon, Macs became far more efficient, even more powerful. They got access to a lot of apps from the iPhone and the iPad. Not that the Mac really needed that, but it definitely made the Mac an even more powerful counterpart to what the iPad was, is, and likely will continue to be for at least for the next couple of years. So all of that, especially also with the combination of just how expensive the iPad Pro became, it really challenged what people expected from a tablet, or even how much they would be willing to pay for a tablet in the first place. This is why the base $329 iPad continues to sell remarkably well, outselling every Mac. But then the question is, will people be happy with an iPad Air? Will more people need an iPad Pro, or at least want it for its superior features? Does the iPad justify its Pro naming? and similar questions like that. Of course, one of the bigger questions that came up was the infamous "what is a computer?" during that Apple ad that showed the girl not knowing like what is a computer basically, and only seeing her iPad as her computing device. Nowadays, that question very much haunts the iPad. Even as Apple adds new functionality to iPadOS, making it an offshoot from iOS in the first place, introducing accessories like the Apple Pencil and Magic Keyboard, and also expanding on their functionality over the years, and even giving the iPad access to Pro apps like Final Cut and Logic, which were demanded for by users for years and years, but then came out to a relative whimper on the market, not really turning the table against the success of the Mac. As the iPad is now well over a decade old, the question is where it goes next. Apple has already confirmed in an infamous "no" by Craig Federighi that they won't be merging macOS and iPadOS, so that leaves us with hardware as the most obvious point of improvement for the iPad. In fact, the iPad Pro, at least in my opinion, has always been one of Apple's most innovative devices. Things like the Apple Pencil, all kinds of different accessories. ProMotion was first introduced on the iPad Pro. Huge redesigns, even like tech like LiDAR is, for example, for some reason on the iPad Pro. So I don't think there's much of an argument against that. It's usually when people argue against the iPad that they will bring up software limitations, but Apple has already said that they won't be bringing macOS to the iPad or merging macOS with iPadOS. So now basically the main thing we can talk about, obviously we're still free to talk about bringing macOS to the iPad, but realistically we need to talk about hardware. Now, what about that hardware? Well, 2024 promises to be a big year. There's supposedly a 3nm M3 processor and a double-stacked OLED panel for category-leading brightness, contrast, and longevity in terms of displays on tablets. So that will be a big step forward. Just in general, the iPad will keep evolving in terms of hardware, and so will its accessories. The Magic Keyboard is likely to get a redesign that works well with a more landscape-oriented iPad. Currently, even as you are using your iPads in portrait or in landscape, the core position which they were designed, this is why the camera is where it is for portrait mode. But as the 10th gen iPad showed, it's very likely that the iPad Pro will also be redesigned to center on a landscape first experience, and of course a new Magic Keyboard will have to accommodate that. With that, the next Magic Keyboard, according to Mark Gurman, will come with an aluminum build, and it could further blur the aesthetic line, not just the functionality line, between Macs and iPads. Now, I personally remain very optimistic about the future of the iPad Pro in particular, but the whole category, at least to me. I know a lot of people will disagree, and of course the rest of the category includes stuff like Android tablets, which I'm not a big fan of. So we are talking about, first and foremost, about the iPad. I prefer the simplicity of the iPad and of iPadOS. This is why I use my M1 iPad Pro with its mini LED screen and all its functionality, more so than my M1 Max MacBook Pro with its mini LED screen and all its powerful software, though of course my streams are the exception because something like OBS does not run on iPadOS. I have made videos covering the iPad and defending the iPad. In fact, one of my relatively successful videos from the early days is called In Defense of the M2 iPad Pro, where I was outlining that better hardware is always welcome, regardless if it comes with a ton of extra software functionality. And even more so if that hardware doesn't come with a higher price tag. Of course, about a higher price tag, we will be later talking in regards to the iPhone Pro. Now, there are a lot of potential changes that might come to the iPad in the future. One such change would be the introduction of a 14-inch model, though according to Mark Gurman, those plans supposedly were scrapped sometimes last year. Whether or not that one reemerges as either a counterpart to the iPad Air or to the an even larger iPad Pro, who knows? But I think that is definitely something that could add to the appeal of the iPad, especially if rumors about a potentially much cheaper MacBook, a MacBook SE if you will, turn out to be true. Apple definitely will need to have a response to that in their own lineup if they introduce like an $800 MacBook. The iPad will need to counteract that, at least in some way. Now, it's hard for me, I know it's easy for many, but for me it's hard to not be excited about the future of the iPad. I have followed this category from day one. I have a big emotional connection to it because this is when I first got into technology around the year 2010, 2011. I hope you will all join me on this journey. This journey, of course, being today's video. If you want to look at my past videos, and please subscribe. Please consider watching my future videos on the iPad as we explore all what is next for the iPad. This introductory statement, as I've said before, will be made available separately on my channel. I hope this will give a lot of people a lot of context into how I feel about the iPad, and so they also know what this stream is about, so they don't have to click on a 2-hour stream or a 3-hour stream, I don't yet know, before knowing what they can await from that stream and basically who that person is. To anybody who's watching this as a standalone video, please consider watching the full stream so you can get all the detail in which I will be going into like in the next 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and 2 hours. So thank you guys so much. Let's get started. Whew, that was an introduction, wasn't it? I see we already have a couple of people watching. Alexander, it's quite ironic, more often than not, Apple are a later adopter of features compared to Android. I predicted that Apple are gonna go ARM when I saw their first Bionic iPhone chip. Well, that makes sense, especially with how much they've improved it. I think it was always like kind of destined that it would like replace Intel. Now I think they're gonna lead the pack, moving everything on the ARM architecture and the others. It depends. I think Windows might be such a bottleneck to ARM adoption that Mac will stay like the dominating like ARM basically device in the market, of course with the iPad together. Thean Chai, you agree that the adoption of ARM across all devices is inevitable. Drama Llama, I cannot even attach a webcam to the iPad. The limitations are killing me. Yeah, definitely. If you want just a traditional like desktop productivity device, this is why I have my M1 Max MacBook Pro. This is where I stream from. The iPad is where I watch my streams using 5G, something the Mac does not have, for example, and where I read your comments and respond to your comments. So there definitely is usability in both. Though of course the Mac also does not have certain functionality like a touchscreen or a pencil like the iPad has. So also like the iPad has much better like back cameras, so it's for stuff like the document scanning it's a very different issue. There are a lot of pros and cons across the devices. I just want mini tablet, large phone with top specs and cellular capability. Well, who knows? Like Apple might at some point introduce something like an iPad Mini Pro, iPad Pro Mini, just iPad Pro 8.3 inches, right? Even if it doesn't come like with an M series processor, it could like come with still with like a 120 Hertz OLED screen or something, maybe just even 60 Hertz OLED. Everything is better than the current screen. So yeah, there's a lot that Apple could do to make the iPad more exciting, and we are getting into this in this video, of course. Now, let me just very quickly start what I actually want to do here. Okay, guys, please let me know. Do you actually see like my desktop screen? Can you still hear me well? I'm experimenting with like working between different like scenes on OBS. I hope that it doesn't like result in like doubled audio. I've checked everything prior, but this is my first stream working with all of that. Also, big shout out to already 5 people watching. This was a pretty like impromptu stream. I did not wasn't even sure if I was going to make a stream today because my voice was feeling a little soft to say the least over the last couple of days. I do not feel ill in other ways, but yeah, that's definitely what could have prevented me from doing a stream. So yeah, please as always let me know if the video quality, the audio qualities, everything is basically to your liking. As always, customer is king here on this channel. Now, the first thing that we are going to get into is Magic Keyboard, because we've already talked about an OLED iPad Pro. We do have some additional stuff which I would very much like to comment on, because I think a lot of people don't quite understand what this rumor would mean, and some people just want to always jump on the hate train of like, oh, the iPad already has hardware, good hardware, why does it need better hardware until it gets like better software? I will try to recontextualize this. Also, a big thank you to 95Mac and Mac Rumors for the way they summarize Mark Gurman articles. The Washington Post, or no, it's Bloomberg, where you can find his articles, is a mess. Like half of the screen is like always covered. It's all like one continuous scroll of like the way he writes. There aren't even like any interesting pictures embedded into it. So sorry, Mark Gurman, I won't be reading directly from you. I've obviously proofread it so that I'm not reading something wrong from 95Mac or Mac Rumors. Yeah, so the first thing here is, which I don't think is even the most exciting thing, but I think it kind of continues the rumors that we've already started talking about in prior videos, is a new Magic Keyboard. And as they are putting it, it will make the iPad Pro more like a laptop than ever. It will have an aluminum base and a larger trackpad. Now, this is part of the latest Power One newsletter, so I am technically a few days late to this. As always, he will Mark Gurman will like make an article and then like 2 days later add some details to it. But I mean, I kind of get it. Like it's his job to keep engagement going. Just briefly gonna check that my stream is working fine here. Great, and we have still people watching. Fantastic. So one thing about it, it will feature a larger surface area trackpad. That is interesting, because if you actually look here at how the Magic Keyboard currently looks, my question is, would that entail that it's not floating anymore? Because except for like just a bigger iPad with a bigger Magic Keyboard, I don't really see how you would add area to this. Just don't forget that the Magic Keyboard does not even have like a function row, so there's already stuff sacrificed in order to give you at least a decently large trackpad, even though by MacBook standards, as you see here, it's abysmally small. So yeah, I don't know. Would it also be finally like a Force Touch trackpad? Because the current one is technically a diving board mechanism, but it still allows you to basically click on the top as well. So it's not like surface area limited like a diving board mechanism used to be on the Macs. But obviously Macs have had now like Force Touch trackpads for years and years and years with great great haptic response. So this is definitely something that would add a lot to the iPad Magic Keyboard. And the question is what that exact redesign would be like. Would it, for example, be more similar to what is on the 10th gen iPad, which basically works very similar to a lot of Logitech accessories, where there's a connector on the bottom. You connect basically a keyboard trackpad combo that offers the exact surface of your iPad, and then on the back you have a separate accessory that allows for the iPad to still stand up, so it's separate. The current big appeal of the Magic keyboard is obviously this floaty design. It's the fact that it's one continuous accessory, which means it's also very well balanced weight-wise, which the iPad 10th gen and like the Surface accessories, for example, aren't. And then of course, by going with aluminum, the question is like, I mean, the iPad already has like a lot of like basically metal inside, at least from how I understand it, to like keep the weight mainly on the bottom, because if you like lean the iPad backwards enough, because of how heavy the iPad is in comparison to the rest of the trackpad, it would just result to it leaning back and falling backwards. So there is stuff here that is adding weight. And of course, going with an all aluminum build here, but keeping this like a soft cover material so that the weight on top is not increased, would further add to how well the device is balanced. At least that's how it appeals to me, or it appears to me. Technically both words apply here. So, but Mark Gurman is not going into further detail here. The aluminum base or top case refers to the bottom area between the keyboard keys, which would also be interesting if like Apple made them like black, if they would use like a silver or a space gray base, but then the all black like aluminum around the keyboards, around the keyboard area. I think this looks really dope on the MacBook Pros. So it will also use a larger Surface trackpad. Yeah, they're also arguing that it will make it all feel sturdier, though I would argue that the Magic Keyboard is already the sturdiest feeling like keyboard accessory for a tablet ever made. The weight difference from switching to aluminum will apparently be negligible, according to Gurman. Yeah, this really lines up to what I've been saying, that there is like something that adds weight here. It's not just the keys and the trackpad, otherwise it just wouldn't stand that well, especially not on a lap. It's unclear if Apple will have to increase the price of the accessory. The current Magic Keyboard retails for a hefty $299 for the 11-inch model and a disgusting $349. You should just take a look also at like the Euro prices. They will like make you gouge your eyes out for the 12.9-inch size. Mark Gurman speculates that the iPad could that the Magic Keyboard could become more expensive because of this, but I just don't know what the sales are on the Magic Keyboard. Like, the Magic Keyboard can afford to be expensive because it's an accessory that Apple can keep selling for like 2, 3, sometimes 4 generations of iPad Pro, right? And then even the iPad Air will support the same Magic Keyboard. But this will be a new design, something that potentially will only work with the with like this new generation iPad Pro, maybe not even the next iPad Air. So what is going to be the market here, and would it make any sense to increase prices if that could lead to like even lower sales? I don't know how low or high they are, but I assume they are not quite as gigantic as Apple might have thought. But this would really, if Apple goes up to like even like $329 and $379, that would still like scare off a lot of customers. And even I myself, use a Logitech accessory. Now that one comes with its own problems, like the fact that it's basically giving in here now that my cat played around with it, but it's still way cheaper and it's also more convenient because the keyboard portion is detached from the back cover, which is how I prefer it and how I kind of think the next Magic Keyboard might work. Drama Llama, an aluminum Magic Keyboard will surpass $500 for sure. No, it won't. I know it's a joke, but I do tend to like to be truthful. I think there is a chance that it might hit $400 for the 13-inch version. I do believe that it would result in terrible, terrible sales, especially outside of the US, where it then hits like 500 euros because of that, but it's an abhorrent price that Apple really shouldn't try to get close to. In my opinion, what it needs is like a $50 price reduction. Now, I understand that it's a premium accessory. I understand that it's not a necessary accessory given alternatives like I've outlined from Logitech, but $300 as an accessory for an iPad Pro that starts at like $800 or $900 is ridiculous. Like, ironically, like the $350 on the 13-inch kind of makes more sense given the $1,100 price point of that iPad and the fact that this iPad is also the one people are more likely to get in higher end configurations in terms of storage and stuff. But yeah, both are ridiculously priced. I will never defend that. Thianchai, $499, exactly. Thianchai, this is how it's not going to hit $500 because it is $499. God, like, do you guys remember the backlash when the Pro stand for the Pro Display XDR was introduced, and they've shown that it was like $999, and how there was a gasp in the room? Yeah, I think this would kind of elicit the same reaction, though it would definitely still be a better deal than the Pro stand, of course. It would be half the price and it would be a much more functional accessory. It will launch alongside the 2024 iPad Pro, which are expected to feature OLED displays for the first time, and as I've outlined before, those are going to be double stacked OLEDs. Now, I've heard from some like people like me who basically cover Apple rumors that double stacked means that you basically have like two OLED panels on top of each other. That's not how it works. Double stacked just refers to the emission layer of the OLED. It does not refer to the entire panel assembly, obviously. I'm definitely not an expert into where exactly one part of the panel begins and where it ends, but to me it was always funny how people were like, oh, it's two panels on top of each other. So yeah, that's a little funny. Pro stand, Pro wheels, exactly. Apple definitely has a lot of like ridiculously priced accessories, but I love the Pro wheels. I think the Pro wheels are the perfect, like, yeah, the media will talk about it and Apple has no expectations for the sales of this device. They could lose money on every single sale if they wanted to, and it would not matter in the slightest in comparison to every single device they sell. They could give you fucking gold wheels and don't sell a single one of them if they wanted to, though I kind of think that would become like its own like collection item. So to me it's kind of hilarious how this how Apple has this accessories that are very clearly designed to be talking points. Now the Pro stand, I would argue Apple probably didn't think there would be much backlash because it is for what is already like a $5,000 display. So I think they kind of thought, well, now it's a $6,000 display. We're comparing it to $15,000-$20,000 reference monitors anyway, right? In my opinion, the Pro Display XDR should be 120 Hz by now. It should have 4 to 8 times the number of local dimming zones, and it should stay $5,000 with the Pro stand included. I think that would like double its value in the eyes of several people, and it would probably result in like almost every owner of the original Pro Display XDR buying that one. Imagine if it has like, instead of like 500 local dimming zones, if it suddenly has like well over 2,000 or maybe even 4,000, right? It's not that ridiculous. The iPad Pro has 2,000 local dimming zones. So on a 32-inch monitor, you could have like 6,000, 8,000 local dimming zones. If you even, that would still be like lower density of dimming zones. 120 hertz would probably demand Thunderbolt 5, or like I don't know how good display stream compression is these days, if it could still work on Thunderbolt 4. But imagine if it demanded Thunderbolt 5. Suddenly every Thunderbolt 5 device has an extra selling point in that it works with the latest Pro Display. And of course it's like 6K resolution and all the other stuff that makes it special would keep it like the pinnacle of Apple accessories. I don't think there's technically like anything more expensive, which is still like not a standalone device. Yeah, so again, we obviously are talking about different things here. We kind of like went away from talking about the iPad, but Apple has a lot that they can offer with the iPad, and OLED displays are one of those things, and it's one of the things I'm most excited for in the M3 version. Now we also have a questionable rumor, which I love how 9to5Mac and Mac Rumors will like cite sources that they themselves call questionable, but then keep on pushing that information regardless. But I really wanted to cover this because it goes into a different topic, basically, which is what hardware does the iPad really need? And what is even warranted to put out as an option for even a very niche community? Now, I have a clear response here, which I know some people will not love, but I think is very valid. Now, what are we talking about? We are talking about the iPad Pro getting a 4 terabyte storage option, according to a new rumor coming out of Asia. An aggregator account called Ukes1122. Oh yeah, that sounds super believable. Is that Apple will double the storage capacity of the next gen iPad Pro models, which both max out at 2 terabytes currently. The rumor is said to come from a parts company in Apple's supply chain, but otherwise no other information is given. They label this once again as questionable. And they are also outlining some of the limitations of the current iPads. For example, that ProRes is limited to 1080p at 30 fps in models that only have 128 gigabytes, while on models that have 256 or more, it supports the full 4K 30 that is currently capable, that the M2 iPad Pro is currently capable of. So it has a mixed track record. I will not be going into the entire track record of this account. The thing I would like to focus on here is that Apple would likely increase the base storage to 256 gigabytes, so that it would still have 250. So that it would still have 5 capacity categories. In this case, it would be 256, 512, 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, and 4 terabyte. What that means, for example, for the RAM is unclear. There's currently the 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte models come with 16 gigs of RAM, while the lower storage configs come with 8. And it's definitely not a big problem on the iPad, I can guarantee you that. I have a 256 gigabyte M1 iPad Pro, and therefore 8 gigs of RAM, and I have not once had any issues with RAM management. Now they're asking themselves questions whether that means that a 4 terabyte iPad Pro could feature 24 gigabytes or even 32. Now it should be said that 24 gigabytes is a possible storage configuration on M2 MacBooks already. already. So it's definitely not impossible, but I don't honestly see that happening unless Apple has something to sell, like more RAM on, like a huge redesign for Final Cut with like all the capabilities of the Mac, maybe bringing in Xcode, something like that. Maybe it would be like on a 14-inch iPad Pro or something, where people would, and Apple offers you like Stage Manager with even more apps. But all of that could still be done well with 16 gigabytes. So it's all just speculation. Yeah, so as it stands, we're expecting to see the first OLED iPad Pro models in 2024. I've already outlined that. Mass production would start in the beginning of 2024, which makes sense. This is also when we are going to see like 3nm production ramp up. And the revamped iPad Pro models will be accompanied by a refreshed version of the Magic Keyboard. We've already talked about it. Of course, as I've said before, M3 will be probably except for the screen, the largest selling point here. But of course, the iPad would also likely see improvements to like its 5G capabilities. With a redesign, there's always like potential for even slimmer bezels as we go from like 12.9 to 13 inches. Maybe the back cameras would suddenly, somehow, finally get an upgrade. But even like the center stage front camera, in my opinion, is not that good on the iPads. So if Apple added like much better low light sensitivity and better sharpness to that camera, that would also be very much appreciated. And of course, the camera would likely move from here to here if we are talking about a more landscape-oriented redesign. Now, this is what we are likely to get, and as I've outlined, this is what is the most logical next step of the iPad, a new iPad Pro. Now, we obviously would still keep on getting like updates to something like the iPad Air that will get like an M2 chip, and an iPad Mini could get a nicer screen or something. But this is where we are going to see the biggest changes come in first, and then they will trickle down to the rest of the lineup. And with that also, of course, the Magic Keyboard, whether that means that it inherits some of the design from the 10th gen iPad keyboard accessory, or it continues mostly with the design of the current iPad Pro and iPad Air Magic Keyboard, it remains to be seen, but it would definitely be like the go-to accessory of except for an Apple Pencil for the next iPad Pro. And speaking of Apple Pencil, there's also of course the question if maybe it would require a 3rd gen Apple Pencil, because maybe the as you can see here, right, this is the magnets where the Apple Pencil connects, and maybe in order to put a camera up here, Apple would have to redesign the magnetic connectors, which also of course include charging. This is more than just a magnet. If this was just a magnet, Apple could easily put a camera in here, but because it also obviously has some charging hardware, this changes the equation a little bit. Apple could still put the camera slightly off center, or they could put like 2 magnetic connectors, right, like one here, and then put the camera still in the center. But then it would make it a little less intuitive in how you put the Apple Pencil on the iPad. So this is kind of my speculation. This is kind of why I love speculating about hardware, is because a lot of stuff is always so unclear until we finally see it, and sometimes it makes amazing sense, like when the 2018 iPad Pro came out and it had this fantastic like slate like design, the way that the Apple Pencil connects to the iPad. And then of course we have stuff like the 10th gen iPad, which comes with this weird USB-C to female like lightning cable and stuff like that. Or let me briefly check on that. right? How does that work again? I always forget it. So the iPad, this is the 10th gen iPad, the Apple Pencil. Yeah, this is how it connects to this. This is the good Apple Pencil. Yes. So how does it connect? Oh, Apple, of course, is not showing it. So, wait. Learn more. No. No. Okay, the Apple Pencil. Yes. Because the Apple Pencil is still Lightning, but the 10th gen iPad is USB-C. So it needs this weird accessory, and this is why I've been so critical of the 10th gen iPad. But how does it like connect for the first time and like charge? Wait. Okay. Oh, first of all, this is, by the way, the Magic Keyboard Folio, it's called. I always forget the name. I really, really like this. Now, basically the degree of the folding mechanism here is not as wide, basically, as I would like to. I would like for it to be able to basically lay the iPad almost flat, maybe with like 10 degrees here, so like 170 degrees fold basically. But I really like here it has like that control roll basically, and it has like a decently large trackpad for the size, so that's definitely something I really like. Learn more about keyboards. Wait, Apple does not show that. Like I definitely remember that stuff being on the website more easier to see. Like iPad 10th gen Apple Pencil cable. Oh, okay. So it's a female Type C to a female Lightning adapter. Oh yeah, I forgot. This is so messed up. This is so ludicrously complicated. They could have just made a USB-C version of the first generation Apple Pencil, or better yet, oh my god, like, and look at how confusing this marketing is. Like, they basically put it on here just like you would put an Apple second generation Apple Pencil on top, as if it was like magnetically connected here, but that's not how it works. Oh wow, this is so bad. Look at this. This is how you connect it. Oh my god. Pair your Apple first gen with your iPad 6 gen. Oh, here it is, just plug in, right? So Apple went from this solution to this solution, and what they could have had is just this being the magnetic solution, the real one. Wow, that's kind of insane, the step backwards that we've seen here. It's basically 2 steps back from what we currently have, because it's even worse than how iPads used to connect to the Apple Pencil. Yeah, so that was a nice diversion. But let's talk about something different here. Now, that something different is, unfortunately, I've put it in my thumbnail because I personally still believe it's possible. Though it's definitely unlikely that it would be the M3 iPad Pro at this point. So, according to Mark Gurman, Apple got close to launching a 14-inch iPad. Oh, this year. I believe I've said that they canceled it like in 2022, but apparently it was still designed for this year. So let me get through it. I've actually not had a great time to read up upon the on the 14-inch iPad. So Apple has been exploring the concept of an even larger iPad since 2021. Here's an even larger iPad for all of you. Yeah, I'm putting you down. And look, I've touched her once. This is how much hair I have on my hands. It's insane. So Apple has been exploring this since 2001 and almost released a 14-inch model in what would have been the biggest iPad Pro to date this year. Now, there is apparently no such product in Apple's imminent product pipeline. One complication was apparently the transition to OLED displays in the iPad lineup, which could invoke considerably higher costs and larger tablet displays. I think part of it is also like sourcing. Like there is like the Samsung Tab S9 Ultra, which has a 14-inch OLED panel. But if Apple already has like a supply chain going for a 13-inch iPad, it would kind of be insane to like add cost to it last minute, or to create an even larger model just to add an extra inch to the iPad. Gurman was first to float the rumor of Apple designers and engineers exploring iPads with bigger screens. In January 2022, this is, by the way, guys, why I thought that it was designed for last year, because I remember the rumor from last year. This was followed by the news that multiple suppliers, including BOE and LG, were converting factories to be able to supply Apple with OLED displays around 15 inches in size. Now, that could also, of course, apply to future MacBooks. Like a 14-inch MacBook Pro and 16-inch MacBook Pro, so around 15 inches in size. The leaker known as Majin Buu that claimed that Apple was working on an iPad with a 14.1-inch display with the M2 chip, so this is why any future version, I kind of assume, would at least have the M3. A rumor corroborated by often accurate display industry analyst Ross Young, who added that the device would have a mini LED display, but no promotion for variable refresh rate up to 120 Hz. Yeah, that was such a weird rumor where people were saying that this was like a counterpart to the iPad Air, or even like the cheaper iPad. This was before the 10th gen iPad launched, and not the new iPad Pro. So that was a really weird era of rumors that definitely didn't pan out. By the way, I think that the reason why it didn't have like promotion and stuff was because Ross Young was probably looking at like very early stuff there, where Apple might have been still experimenting, like, oh, at which price point do we put this device? Will this be a Pro? Will this be a base iPad? Maybe they were even just experimenting with the panels themselves and not like with full-on iPad designs. So yeah, I don't think that those rumors will like pan out at this point. Like Apple will not be launching like a mini LED non-promotion panel. If anything, they're more likely to launch a promotion non-mini LED panel, because promotion 120 Hz screens are pretty cheap and easy to surface, which cannot be said about mini LED. So why would you like basically limit mini LED with a non-promotion screen if you could just use promotion? And 120 Hz and variable refresh rate could probably be more appealing to many people than the XDR of mini LED. In July last year, he amended his forecast, saying that Apple had switched to an LCD display. So I was basically correct, even like not even remembering this. The likes of which are used on the iPad Mini and iPad Air, so that would definitely put it into the cheaper device category for Apple. If it was like a basic 60 Hz LCD screen, that's the cheapest thing Apple puts out. In October 2022, it reported that Apple was developing a 16-inch iPad. I think that was always just experimenting on their parts. The respective device would have approximately the same screen size as a 16-inch MacBook Pro, providing users with a significantly larger canvas to work with. Finally, Young said in December that Apple had shelved its plan to launch a 14.1-inch iPad. By the way, oh yes, of course. So I think I might actually be correct here when I say that Apple was supposed to launch this last year instead of 2023. I think Mark Gurman is kind of wrong, because unless Gurman is like going by somewhat separate sources, I think Young is definitely usually more correct than Gurman. So if Young by December had already already said that Apple was not planning to launch a 14-inch iPad, that obviously scraps any potential from it coming out in 2023. So the potential was always of it coming in 2022, which didn't pan out. So Young said, okay, so that means it's shelved. And now Mark Gurman is several months later is basically confirming that. Despite the tumultuous state of rumors about larger iPad models, Apple could still be interested in the prospect of launching such a device in the future. The biggest iPads that have been available since 2018 are 11 and 12.9-inch iPad Pros. This means that the largest iPads are still smaller than the smallest MacBooks. By the way, that is not 100% correct. The 13.3-inch 16 by 10 aspect ratio of a MacBook Air is not significantly larger than the 4 by 3 aspect ratio of a 12.9-inch iPad Pro. This is a common misconception. You cannot compare display area size between displays with such a different aspect ratio. I often see that problem. It's not true when people make that comparison. Just, 12.9 is smaller than 13.3. That still, you have, by the laws of Pythagoras and I believe in English it's the Pythagorean theorem, right, or something. In German it's der Satz des Pythagoras, by how you basically like calculate the area of a display or a surface in general. 12.9 is not automatically smaller than 13.3 inch when we are talking about the diagonal. Since the 12-inch iPad Pro is already in a similar range, I think this is how you should always put it. It's a similar range to the 13.3-inch iPad, 13.3-inch MacBooks, and is rumored to increase to 13 inches, at which point this display will definitely have more surface area. It seems like just a matter of time before Apple offers a significantly larger iPad model. I don't know if I would agree with that conclusion. I think the larger Apple makes an iPad Pro, the less likely it becomes that Apple would have an even larger, cheaper iPad, right? It's kind of like, sure, there's like technically the 15-inch MacBook Air and we have like the 14-inch MacBook Pro, but the actual counterpart to the 15-inch MacBook Air is the 16-inch MacBook Pro, and the real counterpart to the 14-inch MacBook Pro is the 13-inch MacBook Air. In fact, the difference of 1 inch is actually more substantial when you consider that the MacBook Pros have a taller, or they used to, right? It's not a 13.3 inch, it's like a 13.6 inch MacBook Air for the M2 version. But when you compare it to like the 13.3 MacBook Air, the 14-inch iPad, the 14-inch MacBook Pro does not only have a larger screen by diagonal, but it also has a taller aspect ratio. That was enough math. It's very late. It's a Tuesday. I am pretty good at math, but I obviously don't plan on doing any calculations here. But yeah, I don't necessarily agree with like the logical chain of this conclusion, that it definitely means we will get a significantly bigger iPad model. Thienchai, every inch counts. Exactly. I'm counting every inch here, but every inch also counts. Yeah, I need some water because of how much I just talked about inches. I got thirsty. Bloomberg has repeatedly discussed Apple's interest in bigger iPads, and although the 14.1-inch iPad model that was in the works is now believed to be cancelled, so again, all those rumors kind of stack up, the 16-inch model, last reported by The Information, could still be in active development, though I would really argue that it's probably not 16 inches. Maybe it's like 15? 16 is like such a ridiculous size for an iPad, although we have not heard anything about it for quite some time. I cannot, like, I don't know. I think I'm getting a little nervous during my streams. This is why I'm lisping a little bit and have like those speech problems that I never have in real life. You guys make me nervous and shy for some reason. The way I want to like combine all of that stuff is, it's a little complicated because it's yet another sketchy report. This one actually being super sketchy is that Apple plans to announce a low-cost MacBooks to compete with Chromebooks. Now let me be perfectly clear. Apple will not be competing with $300, $400 or even $500 Chromebooks with their MacBooks. But maybe with like the more expensive versions that could make some sense. So let's get through this, and then I will try putting it all together into how I think basically it all comes together and how the iPad stacks up against the MacBook, and just how it evolves as a device category on its own. So again, it's a very sketchy report here that Apple will make ultra low-cost MacBooks, in fact a whole series, maybe that would just refer to the branding. It's designed for the education sector at what is implied to be a substantially lower price. Now substantial could be half the price, it could be 1/3 the price, or it could just be 15% lower. That would still be substantially lower. It suggests Apple is seeking to compete with Chromebooks and could launch the new models as soon as the second half of 2024. So it's a report from Digitime, which again, there's also some other stuff from Digitimes in general, which is usually just copy pasta from stuff people like Mark Gurman say, who are much more respected in the leaker sphere. But yeah, let's see what they're trying to say. Sources said, super clear, not any like, not display supply chain sources nor like assembly line sources. Okay, Apple will likely launch a new product line for its low-cost MacBooks. Now this is why I said MacBook SE much, right, to differentiate it from existing MacBook Air and Pro lines. The outer appearance will still use a metal casing but made of different materials. What? Like there's no substantially cheaper material to use than aluminum. Aluminum is lightweight. Apple has years and years of expertise of how to use aluminum. Apple has even its own internal recycling processes, so materials that get used in the welding process basically can be reused. It might be that Apple could use like 3D printing for some like metal components, which is obviously nowadays possible and is rumored to also come to like the Apple Watch, but it wouldn't make it substantially cheaper. It would make just some parts a little easier to make. The overall chassis would still be pretty expensive if it was like an all-around aluminum metal casing. Apple has a history of making plastic devices, so why wouldn't the cheap MacBook kind of go back to the iconic white MacBook? I don't know. They definitely don't know either. The unit price of the mechanical components will be lower. Fantastic, whatever that means, allowing for a more affordable price point. Like, it would make more sense for like the panel to be cheaper, for it to use like an older processors. All that would likely save more money than if they just try to make still a full metal casing. Somehow, like, would they just make it half as thick and like really easy to bend and shit? The plastic would make infinitely more sense if they really wanted to hit a much lower price point, but I doubt they will. Allowing for a more affordable price point in the education market. Apple does not have any education market exclusive devices. Apple usually has like a 10% education discount, and then Apple has like back to school programs where you can get like gift cards or like AirPods with your iPad or Mac purchase. So I highly doubt Apple would make something exclusive for the education market these days. Again, so this is also part of the rumor that I don't believe. Major suppliers Quanta Computer and Han High Precision Industry, Foxconn, show no signs of related activity. Therefore, chances the product would launch in the first half of 2024 are unlikely. Oh my god. Oh my god, yeah, like as they're saying here, competing with Chromebooks would mean like competing with devices that sometimes cost like $150, $200, and even like the premium models are like $600 at most. So no, and the cannibalization risk would be huge. I actually don't think so. I think this device would likely be garbage in many ways. What I wanted to talk about, yeah, for one, I don't think this all needs such a long rebuttal. What I would like to go back to is just think of what we've talked about here, right? Apple is thinking of making larger iPads, whether that means 14 inches or 16 inches, right? Apple is giving the Pro functionality like OLED screens, and what I've also really wanted to double down on, it's not the fact that the iPad Pro needs 4 terabytes, but I want for it to start with 256 at the least. I would prefer to start with 512. I certainly would prefer for there to not be a $200 gap between 256 and 512 gigabytes, something that likely costs Apple like $5 to $10 at most, given the mass production that they can assume there. But Apple will likely at some point offer 4 terabyte iPads Pro, as will they offer 4 terabyte MacBook Airs at some point. Apple is giving the iPad accessories that make it more Mac-like. Guys, do you see what I'm getting at? Like, an OLED iPad Pro will likely be like $1,000. Its corresponding Magic Trackpad will be $400, right? But consider what that could mean once the iPad is at 256 gigabytes of minimum storage. That could mean that, for example, look at this here, right? We go here. I hope it's the US pricing. Let's click on blue. It starts with 64 gigabytes and then it goes up to 256. What if it now started at 128 and moved up to 512? Especially if it had like a fixed Apple Pencil, I think, and like an A16 chip as an upgrade over the A14 it currently has, and 6 gigs of RAM instead of 4 gigs of RAM, right? All stuff that is very, very much possible to put into a $450 and then $600 device. Why would Apple need a Mac there? Don't forget that Chromebooks work through the browser. Chromebooks do not have inherent functionality that is that superior to an iPad that supports Stage Manager. Apple could port Stage Manager, maybe give this like 8 gigs of RAM and stuff like that if they really wanted to. It definitely is possible, right? They could give it like 8 gigs of RAM on the higher storage config, right? And maybe 6 gigabytes on the 128 gigabyte version. And boom, they have a full-on response to Chromebooks. And they can still sell you like a $200 accessory, which let us quickly see. It also has support for cellular, again, which not every Chromebook even offers. No engraving, thanks. Apple Pencil, thank you, no first-gen Apple Pencil. No USB-C to Apple Pencil adapter. But like also the Magic Keyboard Folio, it's $250. It's still way too expensive in my opinion, given the base price of this device. This is more than half the price of the base configuration, right? When we are looking at the 64 gigabytes. But this can compete with Chromebooks better than a cheaper MacBook. And a MacBook SE, so to speak, if we are now exploring Apple's website here, look at the MacBook Air. The MacBook Air with M1 chip, right? It's currently priced at $999. What do you think will happen to it if the base the new designed M2, right, MacBook Air, which would then turn into the M3 version, what do you think would happen to a device that only has 256 gigabyte if this model suddenly starts at 512? Maybe if this one starts at 12 gigs of RAM or even 16, then suddenly this model should be priced much closer to like $800 or at the very most $900. Apple already has responses to Chromebooks. Apple already has responses to other tablets. The reason why Apple doesn't super aggressively like price these devices lower than they currently are is because they're actually selling decently well at their prices. For all of my dislike of the 10th gen iPad that I outlined, it actually sold pretty well when it came out. The M2 MacBook Airs are actually like about $100 cheaper than people expected them to be. So even while it still sucks that they like start at 256 gigabytes, at least getting like a 512 gigabytes, a 13-inch MacBook, a 15-inch MacBook Air is not that outrageously priced given its great battery life, its large screen, its good camera, its Thunderbolt ports and stuff like that. It's definitely not the industry's best deal, right? But given how great Apple Silicon is for a lot of tasks and even some like quality of life things, like it started coming with the dual USB-C charger out of the box, it's definitely not something Apple has to currently worry about. Apple is far more likely to give you this $14.99 config for $12.99 so that people would really start to look into it, instead to give you this $12.99 config for suddenly like $800 or something like that. This is not how Apple ever works, or ever worked for that matter. Creating new designs is complicated and expensive, so even if you make a design that is actually cheaper, you really need to make sure that it's selling well, that it still has a decent profit margin, and that it's not cannibalizing higher profit margin devices so much that it suddenly like isn't worth the cost of creating it in the first place. So Apple already has plenty of responses, and they don't have any, like they do have technically even stuff to respond to like the $300 Chromebooks. That is not the iPad I wanted to see. Where is it? The iPad? Wait, where's the 9th gen iPad? There it is. Right? This one starts with an A13 chip, which is actually better than what you find in a lot of Chromebooks. It starts with 64 gigabytes, which, yeah, that's definitely not much, but given that you are using a Chromebook also potentially mostly from the internet and saving basically nothing onto it, 64 could actually be enough. And for $150 more, and you're still below $500, and now you get 256, which is definitely more than a lot of Chromebooks have. Then you get a cellular option, which is again at $610. It's like definitely getting more expensive than most Chromebooks, but it's actually a much better device at that point as well. It has capabilities that many Chromebooks don't. And then, of course, it supports the Apple Pencil, which, yes, Chromebooks definitely do have like pencil accessories, and also definitely cheaper ones, but they are likely to work worse than the Apple Pencil. And then on top of it, you get a smart keyboard, or more likely, you just get a cheap Bluetooth keyboard and like a $30 nice feeling mouse. If you want to, you get something really nice like this Logitech Master 3 mouse. So again, no keyboard, right? And then we have a $600 device with 256 gigabytes and cellular. With this, in my opinion, also competes quite well with Chromebooks. So this idea that Apple would need Macs to compete with Chromebooks is ridiculous. and it's something I really wanted to use as a summary for all this stuff that we've talked about. Apple likes selling you pro iPads and then trickling some of that functionality down to the Air. Apple still has like value levers to pull, like doubling the storage, especially in like the iPad Air, that also starts like, this is the worst thing probably in Apple's lineup. When you look at the iPad Air, and let's look at blue, my favorite color, it also starts at 64 gigabytes, just as the 9th and 10th gen iPad. This is terrible value, and this makes this not good value either, because in my opinion a 256 gigabyte iPad Air should not cost more than $699, probably not more than $649 for that matter. And then of course cellular is also like $150, which again is what is also priced for like the pros, but it's a larger percentage in comparison to the iPad's Air base price. So yeah, Apple has so much to do with like their Chromebook alternatives that isn't just giving you a dirt cheap MacBook. Like, look at what their keyboards are priced at. They want to sell you a $300 Magic Keyboard with a $600 MacBook Air. Like, they're not interested in selling you $500 devices. This was always so ridiculous to me that people would think that Apple would ever be interested in that. At some point, sure, Apple could sell you an $800 MacBook SE that is either an M1 or an M2 MacBook Air years down the line. But for now, they really don't need to. And secondly, I don't even think it would have that big of an impact on the Chromebook market. If anything, it would have a larger impact on the laptop, with the Windows laptop market. But it would also result in Apple having lower margins, and Apple doesn't like that. And you know what shows me that Apple doesn't like lower margins? Well, that's the last topic of today. The major price hike coming for these two reasons, for the iPhone 15 Pro and the iPhone 15 Ultra or the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Now it's pretty much exactly a week until the Wanderlust event, where we will see the iPhone 15, the iPhone 15 Pro, the Apple Watch Series 9, and the Apple Watch Ultra 2nd generation. So this is a Digitimes research article, which again is just doubling down on stuff that has been said by every other leaker at this point. So iPhone 15 and 15 Plus are expected to be around the same price as 14 and 14 Plus. Unfortunately, in my opinion, that also means that we are not getting double the storage to 256 gigabytes on those devices. But I also think the 15 Plus at $900 US is too expensive. I think the best thing that Apple could do is do a $50 price reduction. Now, the reason why I say $50 is because I don't see them offering an $100 price reduction. I think there's just not enough backlash against this device category. But the 14 has sold actually really well, and the 14 Plus still sold better than the 13 mini, which is a damn shame because the 13 mini was actually a good device for its time. But those devices will like not have ProMotion, so they're definitely not enthusiast grade. They don't have periscope cameras, they don't have the A17 chip. So in my opinion, if Apple, instead of making those devices $800 and $900, made them $750 and $850, the 15 Plus that is, I think this could actually work really well, especially if that also meant that the 14 and 14 Plus are not getting $100 price reductions, but $150 price reductions. So the iPhone 14 would now be $650, the iPhone 15 would be $750, the 14 Plus would be $800, and the 15 Plus would be no, the 14 Plus would be 750, and the 15 Plus would be 850. Right, so the price of the iPhone 15 and the 14 Plus would be identical, and then those models would be $100 cheaper and $100 more expensive, respectively. However, those are just speculations, and we definitely are not seeing the same prices, and certainly not price reductions on the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max. By the way, the reason why I'm speculating on this, it is not unheard of. The iPhone 11 gained an extra camera, even better battery life. It had a faster A13 processor with 4 gigs of RAM instead of 3 gigs of RAM, and it was $50 less expensive than the XR was. So there definitely is a lot that Apple can leverage here. So never think that Apple is above giving you ever so slightly attractive price reductions, because if those models are now, if the 15 and 15 Plus now come in cheaper than 14 and 14 Plus, this could make people forget that they don't even have like 90 Hertz screens, much less 120 Hertz ones. So Lynn from Digitimes Research, who is a senior analyst there, expects that the Pro lineup will see a major price hike. There will be two primary changes: the switch from stainless steel to titanium, and the new periscope lens camera system, though that is obviously only on the Pro Max / Ultra model. So if he's saying that it's a major price hike, maybe it's only major for the Ultra, and it's just a price hike or a decently high price hike on the Pro. Again, it's Digitimes, right? So it's all give and take. Despite the price increases, however, Digitimes still predicts that the iPhone 15 Pro models will be the most popular phones from this generation. So yeah, I agree with that. Apple is also is expecting that the popularity of the 15 Pro Max will increase. The 14 Pro Max was already the most popular model from the 14 series, and Apple is expecting the 15 Pro Max to be even more successful. It would have the highest share. We already talked about that. That share is expected to be like 35 or even 40%. So that's definitely something pretty aggressive that Apple is like arguing for here. One rumor that's been floated is that the iPhone 15 Pro will be $100 more than the 14 Pro, so that would start at $1099. The 15 Pro would be $200 more expensive, so that's $1299 instead of $1099. However, I have also said that one thing that is pretty much guaranteed is that if Apple starts the 14 Pro Max at $1299, I expect it to start with 256 gigabytes. I think Apple will know that increasing the price of even like, because currently you can get 256 gigabytes for $1199, which sure, that's one thing, right? But can you imagine if suddenly for $1299 you would be limited to 128 gigabytes? So given that Apple also will market those devices as like fast throughput rate through USB-C, Wi-Fi 6E as well, high resolution cameras, great 4K recording, a fantastic zoom on the Ultra, I don't see $1299 not coming with 256 gigabytes. Could I see $1099 on the regular Pro to still have 128? I could, given that it would very much just be a compensation for inflation. A 10% price increase. However, I think that logistically, I don't know how much such a model would sell, because the difference between $1099 and $1199 like at this point, just make it 1149 and 1299 and make both 256 gigabytes and make the $150 difference instead of $100 because of the more expensive camera. I think that it could happen, right? 1149, 1299 could actually be decent prices. Well, here it's definitely a lot of speculation, and I mean, so am I, but I don't claim to be an analyst here. I'd be surprised if Apple has the guts to increase. Okay, so this is just a comment here. If Apple has the guts to increase the price of the Pro Max by nearly 20%, yeah, I can wait for Apple to explain the price increases thanks to their courage. This is such a stupid comment. They are legitimate. Like, you can, like, we can all argue about how Apple prices their devices, and I have outlined how, for example, I don't agree with their storage pricing and their RAM pricing. But when you actually compare the Pro Max to something like the Galaxy S23 Ultra, you will find it's already better in many ways. And this will definitely be better in basically all ways, except for not supporting like a pencil-like accessory. So yeah, I hate those comments because courage on like removing features is actually something that has accompanied Apple since the floppy disk era. So this idea that when Apple was talking about courage by removing the 3.5mm headphone jack, that it was completely asinine, completely dishonest, I have always disagreed with that, and Apple has not once argued about courage or shit like that when it comes to pricing. They have always said, we are a for-profit company, we think our prices are fair, and the market response validates whenever we do a price reduction, a price increase, or whatever. Apple has not once told us that they are increasing prices due to courage. I know it's a joke, but it's a bad one. Tim Cook may have hinted at Apple's plan to increase iPhone 15 Pro prices during Apple's Q1 2023 earnings call. iPhone contains their contacts and their health information and their banking information and their smart home and so many different parts of their life, which, by the way, all of this does not actually need a lot of storage. So maybe Apple would see a reason to increase prices without giving us more storage. Their payment vehicle and for right, and for many people could accept at the time, and so I think, wait, what? And so many different parts of their life, their payment vehicle, and for many people. Oh, okay, so this is like going back to the beginning. Cook said at the time, I don't think that this is the right way to structure this sentence as like a way to like translate it from speech, but whatever. And so I think people are willing to rely to really stretch to get the best they can afford in the category. Yeah, I kind of think that 10% increase kind of is at the very least what we should expect. I'd be surprised if Apple has the guts to increase the 14 Pro Max price by nearly 20%. Well, I actually wouldn't. If Apple gives us 256 gigabytes, I actually definitely could see it being $12.99, because that technically would be an increase of just $100 over $11.99. So it wouldn't even be a 10% increase, it would be like an 8% increase. So it just would be that the lower entry version would just be gone. And then Apple could argue that like those models would be like the 15 and 15 plus, but with more storage. It would be a slightly ridiculous argument, but this would be the argument that Apple makes. Apple could say like, oh, you still have OLED screens and you still have 48 megapixel cameras, and you can get the 512 gigabyte iPhone 15 Plus for less than the 256 gigabyte version on the Pro Max. So please get this if you want to save $100. So Apple is expected to announce those phones on September the 12th, which is, as I've said, a week from now. Now it's less than a week from now. now. It's 6 days and 21 hours, something like that, with pre-orders to follow on September 15th and a release on September 22nd. It should also be said that some rumors are pointing that the Pro Max will not be instantly available, or at most in very, very short supply on September 22nd, and that it would be the rest of the lineup that primarily sells right away, and then the 15 Pro would become either better available or available at all in a few weeks from the September 22nd date. So yeah. Oh, this was still an almost 2-hour video, but no, wait, I started at 21:30. Okay, so it's a 1.5-hour video. Thank God, so it didn't turn out that long. Yeah, we've talked about quite a lot of iPad stuff. I've actually seen that iPad stuff does pretty well on my channel, and especially if I put like M3 in my title, it seems to work well for the video. Also, thank you guys so much for joining. I know a lot of you just tend to listen to. There wasn't that much, I think, to comment on for this stream. I will obviously be streaming at some point this week, but expect definitely a lot of content next week. Hopefully you guys will be interested in joining me on a live stream during the presentation, where I watch on like my TV, but then I interact with chat and stuff like that. If you want, and I will likely leave like a live ticker up from like 9 to 5 Mac or Mac Rumors, so that you could still see something on the screen if you choose to like put it on your phone, or maybe I will just leave my face, though that would kind of be problematic. I think if you don't have any context to what I'm referring to, because there will be obviously this 5-7 second delay that YouTube streams are kind of known for. Russell Wong, Russell, are you joining us just right now? Because we are, I actually cannot see the emoji that, oh, it's a laughing face, okay. Is that some kind of specific YouTube emoji? I have never seen that before. Russell, are you new to the channel? I've not seen you comment yet. If you're joining us right now, that's a little sad, but of course you can catch this video as a VOD basically right away as I stop streaming. YouTube actually works with streams pretty quickly, and then of course, as I've also promised in the beginning, I will cut out the portion where I talked to in the beginning, and that will be available separately on my channel a few hours from now. I usually try to separate to put some time between like my streams and when I upload the video, because otherwise the algorithm just kills how much each video gets promoted and viewed. Yeah, so we are now at the end, and I kind of have learned to make like shorter than 2-hour videos, but I kind of still haven't learned to make shorter than 1-hour videos. But I think it's a learning process for all of us. We have 167 subscribers, which is insane given the size of the channel just a month ago. So I wanted to thank you guys so much for the support. Just a week ago we were at 150, so that's a more than 10% increase, and who knows where next week will take us, once hopefully the algorithm helps us as we react to all the Apple event stuff, as I will also rush to provide you with reviews and reaction content as I get like my own Apple Watch update, my own iPhone upgrade and stuff like that. And of course I will be providing content for like iOS 17, macOS Sonoma and stuff like that. But as I've said before, I actually wanted to do like an iOS 17 review a while ago. I kind of might want to do so once I have the new iPhone, because I don't think there is that much new in iOS 17 for me personal. I've said before, I like iOS 17 a lot. I just don't think there is much that I can put into a review. there's a lot of like subtle stuff that I really like just how well like text prediction and dictation works on it. But I don't think this like warrants me making a full review video, and I also don't want to make it part of a stream. So I will think of some creative way to review iOS 17, at least creative relative to how I usually put out live streams, which again is something you know in how I interact with the community. Of course, I'm also excited for macOS Sonoma. There are actually some relatively bigger stuff that you can look forward to, even like the beautiful wallpapers and all the stuff that makes like video conferencing or even like live streaming easier, thanks to how it can give you like this overlay of like your face or your body while you're presenting something. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there, but I also want to test it all of it out once it's actually finished, because it was like a little buggy and it made like OBS crash for a while. This is why I use like the very standard OBS features as you see right now, but maybe as OBS gets updated, I will try doing my presentations in a slightly different way. And then base my reviews on that. It's ironic we now have 5 people watching, which was more than for like the last half hour, but we are now wrapping it up. This is how it usually happens. I know that has a lot to do with like the time zones in the US and when people are actually capable of watching me, but I know you guys are also giving me amazing support once the videos are uploaded. Like my last iPad Pro video hit like 1,500 views, 150 viewed hours. It's insane for my channel size. So I'm very grateful for all the support. I'm very much looking forward to giving you more content, giving you slightly different content. I hope you like stuff like the inclusion of my scripted openers. As always, please leave comments and suggestions for what you would like to see next and constructive criticism. Subscribe, like, share, all the YouTube stuff. Of course, hit the notification bell so you don't miss my upcoming streams, especially next week. So thank you guys once again. This is Mark Tech tuning out.